watching Global Lens on News 9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. As always, we have a packed show for you. Let's get started with our big focus. There has been an outpouring of anger and outrage across the globe over Israel's airstrike on a displacement camp for displaced people in Rafah that left 45 people dead, many of whom were women and children. Heartbreaking images show charred bodies being pulled out of the rubble and a man holding the headless body of a child. The strike immediately prompted international calls for Israel to abide by the ruling of the International Court of Justice, which recently ordered Israel to halt its offensive in the city. In a rare admission, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called the strike, which also killed 2 senior Hamas officials, a tragic error, one which will be investigated. But along predictable lines, he said he would not end the war in Gaza until the military's goals were completed. And even as the world condemns Israeli actions, IDF tanks have rolled into the heart of Rafah. These tanks have been seen in central Rafah for the first time since the Israeli Defense Forces entered the southern city earlier this month. EU foreign ministers meeting in Brussels on Monday for the first time engaged in a significant discussion on sanctioning Israel if the country doesn't comply with the ruling from the UN's top court. Irish Foreign Minister Michael Martin told reporters there was a very clear consensus about the need to uphold the international humanitarian law and legal institutions such as the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. He added Israel should adhere to those provisional orders to open the border crossing at Rafah and also to cease its military operation in Rafah. One of the conclusions is to convene a meeting of the EU-Israeli Association Council to raise our grave concerns and to put it to Israel and to seek from Israel a response in terms of complying with the orders of the court. The Irish Foreign Minister also said that within the European Union there is some distance between people articulating the need for a sanctions-based approach if Israel does not comply with the International Court of Justice's rulings versus an agreement at an EU Council meeting, given all of the different perspectives there, he added. Now, about 1 million people have fled Rafah over the past 3 weeks, according to the UN's main relief agency in Gaza, UNRWA. The agency has said this happened with nowhere safe to go, and amidst bombardments, lack of food and water, piles of waste and unsuitable living conditions. Day after day, providing assistance and protection becomes nearly impossible. Over 1 million Palestinians had been sheltering in Rafah before Israel ramped up airstrikes and ground operations there. Many had fled to the city from other areas of Gaza after Israel launched its war on Hamas. It was Israel that had ordered thousands of civilians to leave some areas of Rafah as it intensified its military operations in the city. Israel has vowed to press on with its Rafah offensive despite international outrage and a US warning not to proceed. Many are now asking, has Israel's Rafah action crossed US President Joe Biden's red line yet? Remember, he'd recently said he would halt some shipments of weapons to Israel if the latter invaded Rafah. Meanwhile, Spain, Norway and Ireland today formally recognized Palestine as a state, much to the chagrin of Israel, which calls the move a reward for Hamas rapists and murderers. Canada has said it will issue visas to 5,000 Gazans, more than it originally pledged, and said it was horrified by the Israeli airstrike in Rafah that triggered a blaze, causing 45 deaths. The European Union has agreed in principle to revive an EU civilian mission at Rafah, but said it would need accords from all sides to press ahead. The bloc is considering reviving its European Union Border Assistance Mission Rafah, which has not been operational since 2007 when Hamas seized full control of Gaza. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell has also accused Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of using false claims of anti-Semitism against the International Criminal Court for his own political ends.
Palestinians sifted through smoking wreckage in Rafah on Monday as others mourned the dead. Hours after an Israeli airstrike triggered a massive blaze in a tent camp where displaced people were taking shelter. Dozens were killed, according to Palestinian officials in Hamas-run Gaza, who said the toll was likely to rise. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told parliament the strike was not intended to kill civilians.
In
Rafah, we already evacuated about 1 million non-combatant residents, and despite our utmost effort not to harm non-combatants, something unfortunately went tragically wrong. We are investigating the incident and will reach conclusions because this is our policy.
The attack has prompted an outcry from global leaders who are now calling for implementation of a Friday ruling from the UN's top court ordering Israel to stop its assault on Rafah. Israel had kept up its offensive, saying the court ruling grants it some scope for military action there.
I saw images. They are deeply disturbing and horrifying.
The head of the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, or UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini, said he was waiting to hear more about casualties from his team.
There is no safe space in Gaza.
The U.S. called images following the strike devastating and urged Israel to take every precaution to protect civilians. On social media, French President Emmanuel Macron said he was outraged. The German foreign minister and EU foreign policy chief called for the court's ruling to be respected.
I condemn this in the stronger terms.
More than 36,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israel's offensive, Gaza's health ministry says. Israel launched the operation after Hamas-led militants attacked southern Israeli communities on October 7th, killing around 1,200 people and seizing more than 250 hostages, according to Israeli tallies. Israel says it wants to root out Hamas fighters holed up in Rafah and rescue hostages it says are being held in the area. Israel's military said Sunday's strike, based on, quote, precise intelligence, had eliminated Hamas's chief of staff for the West Bank, plus another official behind deadly attacks on Israelis.
We heard this called a tragic mishap, a mistake. I guess the question is, what then to call the ferocious attacks that have killed thousands and thousands of children? How do we describe the actions that have pushed an entire population to starvation? What do we say to, as your question, John, what do we say of those countless children who've had arms and legs amputated, or the thousands who've been orphaned, right? What is the language used to describe the unprecedented devastation to homes and schools, to the uncharted territory of trauma of children? I think then surely the question that needs to be asked is, how many more mistakes is the world going to tolerate?
Horrific incident, not a mishap, a horrific event, which WHO deplores the attack on displaced people who were sheltering in tents in Rafah. The numbers I have so far from the Ministry of Health reportedly killed 35 people, including women and children. The injured were treated by a WHO-supported trauma stabilization point, as well as in the 5 field hospitals that are being run by UK Med and IMC field hospitals, but it absolutely overwhelmed them.
All right, let's introduce our guests. We are joined on Global Lens tonight by Dr. Zakir Hussain, Middle East expert. In a moment, we are hoping to also be joined by Major General Sanjay Meston, defense and geopolitical expert, and Ambassador Suresh Goel, former Indian diplomat. I need to take a quick break here on Global Lens. We'll continue this conversation on the other side.
Start with the end in mind. You need to know where you want to reach. Every morning that we wake up, we are exercising our choice. The destiny is decided. The results are known that I'm going to win. Life of a goalkeeper is something which has always intrigued me.
When you come into a stadium, this is the highest level of pressure.
When I set out to do something, I decide in my mind that failure is not an option.
What you feel very strongly about, those are the stories to tell.
I have a mind which is absolutely restless.
Mind and body are entangled sensations.
That brings me back to golf. It's an amazing game.
This is not a perfect game. You only learn from them.
If you have a formula to a success, then you can replicate it.
I feel this is my first step. I'm starting now.
Winner is first born in the mind. I think, therefore I am. We are all about our mind.
World premiere every Saturday on News 9 Live at 9 p.m.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News 9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Let's now go across to Dr. Zakir Hussain to discuss what's happening currently in Gaza. Dr. Hussain, even as there is growing anger and outrage around the world over the killing of 45 people, 23 of whom we are told were women and children, the images are quite heartbreaking. Charred bodies being pulled out of the rubble, a man holding the headless body of a child, amongst other things. In a rare admission, the Israeli Prime Minister has called this airstrike a tragic error and says there will be an investigation. But at the same time, he's vowed to press on with the Rafah offensive. And even as global outrage over this particular airstrike continues, Israeli tanks have been seen in the heart of Rafah. What does this really tell us about where the war is headed? Because it's very clear, no matter how much international criticism and condemnation comes Israel's way, it really seems to make no difference whatsoever.
This is a double standard of Prime Minister Netanyahu. He wants, on the one hand, to show that he is concerned with the tragic incidents. On the other hand, he is committed to continue his drive to what he called ousting Hamas. But when he says that there will be an investigation, it means that some battalion of his army is frustrated and it is taking wanton actions. But on the same line, he is also committed to complete his task. But he is under pressure of from so many fronts, like European Union, like Biden administration, like ICC, and recently the clash between Egyptian army, which is very unfortunate for them because they were observing ceasefire since 1979. So, to my understanding, the war is turning into a comprehensive war because whatever areas he conquered, the Israeli army conquered, cleared. Again, he has to go back and bombard it and saying that it is mowing the grass. I think that this war is not going to end because both sides are determined on their positions. The Hamas is not ready to accept any deal below that his position, while Netanyahu is also not ready to accept any deal or save his red lines. To my understanding that this is a very serious position in Rafah, Hamas, Israel and the region. But I think that merely condemnation, merely showing concern is not going to stop the Netanyahu government. So very much I feel that the situation will deteriorate further and lead to a comprehensive war because Hamas is also not backtracking. It is also determined, and even killing of his own countrymen is not urging him to change his policies. This is a very catch-22 situation where both the parties are determined to carry forward their agenda. And to my understanding, this war is a final and will prove decisive for Israel because if Israel fails, then it has to compromise with the regional agenda. If Hamas fails, it does not mean that it is going to stop its operation forever. It will regroup and re-emerge and relaunch. Mm-hmm. This is a war for Israel. Either accept the present condition or impose its own mandate in the region. Okay. And on the other hand, you see the Saudi Arabia, which has put its normalization of relation or trading its relation with Israel, is on the condition of accepting Palestine, and that too is not going to happen. So once again, the region is witnessing a logjam. and President Biden is also in a fixed position because as election is nearing, he is feeling nervousness that if in his country the protest in universities and students are continuing, that it is going to affect his election. Already President Trump is going ahead in many of the states, so this is jittering the President Biden. To my understanding, the announcement that this is a tragic mistake maybe under the pressure of Biden president.
Very interesting.
So,
very interesting, Dr. Hussain. You are saying, because as I said at the start of my show, this seems to be a very rare admission by the Israeli Prime Minister. You believe this may have actually come under pressure from his ally, President Biden, who himself is under a lot of pressure at home ahead of the US presidential election, because this is proving to be a very, very unpopular war with many in America, including his own party. Many Democrats have strongly opposed the Biden administration stand on this. Let me therefore take this to Ambassador Suresh Goel. Ambassador Goel, we've seen the heartbreaking images that have emerged from this airstrike on that camp in Rafah that's left 45 people dead. Like I said, charred bodies being pulled out, a man standing with the headless body of a baby. Netanyahu says, tragic error, we will investigate. And just as he says that, we see images of Israeli tanks rolling into the heart of Rafah. That's something that's happened for the first time in the last 2 months since they entered Rafah. So the question really is, can anybody stop Netanyahu? And also, actually, more significantly, let's talk for a moment about President Biden. There are many who are asking, Ambassador, has President Biden's red line been crossed yet? Because if you recall, in an interview recently, he had said he would halt some shipments of weapons to Israel if the latter went ahead and invaded Rafah. That invasion of Rafah was a red line. Has that red line been crossed yet?
Neha, sometimes when I look at the real politics of the region in the Middle East, I really wonder whether what is being said is the position of the countries who say, or is it basically all part of really developing a public opinion or developing an opinion in their own countries? Now, coming to Israel, first of all, is it the first time that 45 people have died in an airstrike in Rafah, in Gaza? There have been so many deaths so far, and all those deaths have taken place either in the ground assault or in the airstrikes. 36,000 people have died. Have they died all in the tank assaults? There have been airstrikes. People have died in the camps. They have been reported over and over again. So the question number one is, what changes this time that Netanyahu admits that this was a technical mistake? What does that mean, technical mistake?
A tragic error actually is what he's called it. He's called it a tragic mistake.
Yeah, a tragic accident, he said.
Yes.
I mean, did he actually not? Okay, number one. Number two, coming to Biden. Biden is known to depend upon the Jewish vote for his own election in terms of, not just the vote, but also financing. There is a lot of money coming into the campaign from the Jewish quarters. Number two, even the academic institutions seem to have taken a kind of a no-no position to anti-Semitic. Semitic is quote unquote, this is how they call it, on the campuses. This has been happening for some time now, and they try to stop it basically on various grounds, even resorting to police tactics. Therefore, my question really here is not whether this is going to change anything at all or not. But I think basically what has happened really is that the geopolitics of the region has compelled Israel to rethink its own strategy, not in the long-term sense, not in a strategic manner, but it's a tactical move. Because eventually Israel, and I think my previous speaker mentioned Saudi Arabia, the fact is that Israel cannot sustain itself on its own in the region. They were coming closer to Saudi Arabia. Qatar had begun to really more or less accept Israel's existence in a different manner. And now Qatar also has given up on the ceasefire. So does it mean that Israel finds itself isolated in the region and therefore they try to make tactical adjustment? My own sense is a tactical adjustment, and nothing much is going to change because Netanyahu is a rightist conservative.
Absolutely.
And he's going to just not change on that.
And these are just statements. It's not as if any of this is backed by any action on the ground. Sir, I need to take a quick break here. I promise to come back to you immediately after this short break.
That ink is a semi-permanent dye called the indelible ink.
We are the sole manufacturer of this indelible ink.
Don't try to repair something which is working.
And if you have facial recognition, you can go vote in any booth anywhere based on where you are, and then it will be recorded that you can't vote anywhere else again.
Can we retire indelible ink and use biometrics? Theoretically, my answer would be yes.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface but not the living people?
Why is the state not looking at putting an embargo on that?
As a Telangana person, I will not accept.
How do ordinary folks deal with this?
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News 9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Before I go across to Major General Sanjay Meston, I just want to quickly get a word in from Ambassador Suresh Goyal. Ambassador Goyal, I'm sorry I had to interrupt you in the last segment. Please go ahead, complete your point. We were talking about how there is growing diplomatic and international pressure on Israel. Also, as we speak, 3 countries today, Spain, Ireland and Norway, have recognized Palestine as a state, much to the chagrin of Israel.
In fact, that is the point I was going to make. Just a couple of days ago, 3 countries in Europe for the first time have recognized Palestine as a state. I mean, there is a majority of the membership of UN which already does so. But European countries for the first time have shown a dichotomy with the USA. And therefore, Israel does realize the pressure that it is growing on it. And whether it is again, basically they will make tactical adjustments only, whether there will be a permanent change in the policy, I doubt very much. But that is another factor, which is actually Saudi Arabia, Europe, and the election in the USA, where if Trump comes, Israel knows very well that it is going to be even more transactional than now. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that, sir. Let me now go across to Major General Sanjay Meston. General Meston, on the one hand, Netanyahu says it was a tragic accident, what happened in Rafah, the killing of 45 people when there was a strike on a camp for the displaced. But of course, Ambassador Goyal is right in saying that it's not as if this is the first time that dozens of people have been killed in Gaza. After all, going by the Gazan Health Ministry figures, more than 36,000 people have died in the last 7 months. Do you believe Israel in any way is facing international pressure as global outrage over this particular incident has been growing, many demanding accountability from Israel? Even as Netanyahu promises an investigation, fact is that he has also vowed to go ahead with the Rafah offensive, and as I mentioned earlier, Israeli tanks have rolled into the heart start of Rafah. How do you see this proceeding from here on?
Neha, you have raised two very interesting issues. One is, of course, the international condemnation, and secondly, how does operations in Rafah progress? What is going on? Firstly, as regards the international condemnation is going on, see, there is no doubt Israel is facing tremendous global pressure from all over the world. As on date, 146 countries have already accepted the formation of a Palestinian state with the capital as East Jerusalem. So that has already been, and out of 193 countries, and I think some more European countries like Malta, Cyprus, etc. are going to follow suit. So global condemnation is there, global pressure is there. Will it impact Israel? I very much doubt it is going to impact Israel. As Ambassador Goyal also brought out, since the war started, large number of such incidents have happened. And not only that, the retaliation, not only on account of diplomatic retaliation and global condemnation, I think the biggest retaliation was by Iran. And of course, the 3H, that is the Hezbollah, Houthi and Hamas, they have been retaliating. And even other day, Hamas fired some rockets from Rafah to Tel Aviv. So what it implies is, Israelis definitely will go for an offensive into Rafah. There is no denying that whether the US aid stops, whether the US bombs stop, they will continue because that is their stated aim to destroy Hamas. Now, whether they can destroy is $1 million question because as a military man fighting in built-up area and here, fighting underground tunnels, till date they have not been able to eliminate them, and Rafah has got the thickest network of tunnels, and we should not be surprised that large number of tunnels are also, networked across to Egypt. So they are going to have a rough time. The tanks have moved into central Rafah. So we expect a full onslaught of a military operation despite the global condemnation. And now where does it lead? I think the fact of the matter is war will continue here. The attempt would be large number of civilian casualties will suffer in Rafah. Some, of course, would be leaving those areas. But what the amazing part is that having cleared North Gaza, Central Gaza, now what is surprisingly that, again, Hamas has consolidated its position in North and Central Gaza, Khan Yunis, etc. So this is again what is amazing. They are regrouping. And
elsewhere in Gaza.
So this is
and let's not forget that a couple of days ago, for the first time in months, for the first time since January, Hamas actually managed to fire a barrage of rockets towards Tel Aviv. So clearly they're sending out the message that we are far from finished. Hold that thought, sir. I need to take a quick break here. I will come back to you to discuss this further.
Forever, there are simultaneous election of Parliament, Assembly and Municipality and Panchayat. So that framework has to be given in the Constitution. That amendment has been suggested.
Are you going to take away the power of dissolution?
I mean, it doesn't require any rocket science to do this. It's a simple constitutional amendment. And the idea is everything goes together.
The Law Commission has set the ball rolling for one nation, one election. Basically, if all goes well, then India may see simultaneous elections to Lok Sabha, state assemblies, municipalities and panchayats in 2029.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Why is the state not looking at putting an embargo on that?
As a Telangana person, I will not accept.
How do ordinary folks deal with this?
जानना है तो देखिए, समझना है तो सुनिए, सीखना है तो पूछिए। और कमाना है तो खरीदिए। जानकारी, सलाह और निवेश सब एक ही सुपर ऐप पर। पैसे का सवाल है तो जवाब है मनी9। आजादी पैसे की, अभी डाउनलोड करें।
I don't think anybody has isolated Ajit Dada Pawar. Ajit Dada has isolated himself.
That led to a lot of bad blood between the ruling partners.
It is not true. You know it very well, who these elements are, who these individuals are. And these are the very reasons why you see a division in the party. Now this contest between Supriya Sule and Sunetra Pawar is really a proxy war between uncle and nephew. And it's being fought in the family bastion of Baramati.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
For the very first time in our investigation, we unmasked the killer of Ravindra Matre.
In 5G, we have to stand with the world, and in 6G, we have to lead the world.
Winning a Grammy was an absolutely surreal experience.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News 9 Live, and we are discussing the Israeli offensive in Rafah. Let me go back to Major General Sanjay Meston. Sir, before the break, you were talking about how you believe Hamas is actually regrouping in the rest of Gaza, even as the Israel Defense Forces focus on Rafah.
Yeah, very true. So, therefore, what is going to happen is, I personally feel this now is going to be linked to the US elections. I think the next 2 to 5 months are going to be very critical. Israel will go out on a full-fledged offensive, firstly in Rafah, and then from there, after having cleared Rafah, which will of course take time. That's why I'm telling maybe 2 to 5 months it will take. And thereafter, they will progress northwards. And I think lot of, talks are on the quiet, that some kind of a governance thereafter would be required, and therefore, probably a peacekeeping force, Arab peacekeeping force may get deployed in Gaza under the banner of Saudi Arabia. Possibility exists. I'm not saying it will happen. And therefore, Israel pulls out. And after that, they will be looking for Palestinians, some kind of authority, some kind of good leaders to, run the country, which will again take time. So all this, if it happens, and of course, hostage rescue, if it happens, I doubt whether that will happen. I perceive majority of the hostage actually would be dying in all these shelling and attacks, etc. So I personally feel that maybe 2 to 5 months are going to be critical, and therefore President Biden may be able to show to the US and maybe to the world that under their influence, at least the Arab peacekeeping force has been able to be deployed. Some kind of a semblance has been drawn up, and I think the next step would be Prime Minister Netanyahu will have to just, I think he will be removed from his chair, and some kind of a pragmatic government. So this is what I foresee possibility exists. Now, will it happen? But let me make the underlying statement. Rafah offensive will carry on, there is no doubt, because that is a stated objective of Netanyahu and Israel, and even the Israeli people are supporting it, that Hamas has to be eliminated. Whether they can eliminate Hamas, now when I say Hamas elimination, it does not mean finishing of the entire 40,000 Hamas cadres, no. Basically, the military hierarchy, the top leadership has to be eliminated. Look, for example, Al-Qaeda. United States was there with the ISF, 52 countries deployed in Afghanistan. They eliminated top leadership. Cadres were yet there. But once the top leadership of such terrorist organizations get over, then they seem to be quite, defunct. Look at Al-Qaeda, that's a live example. So I feel cadres of Hamas will not be destroyed, but top leadership, like even in this attack, I think Israel has stated
They
that
claim that two senior Hamas leaders were killed. That's correct. That's correct.
That's the aim. And thereafter they will look for, some kind of a solution where political reconciliation has to be there. Some kind of a I would not use the word pro, a pro-Palestinian government may be installed, and I think the two-state solution finally has to be part of it, because today Europe, so 3 countries and more, are going to follow
are in
United
fact
Nations
talking
General
about
Assembly.
recognizing Palestine. We will talk about that in just a moment. You know, what happens next? There's been a lot of talk about what happens in Gaza once this war is over, though that seems some way off, because this war doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon. Dr. Zakir Hussain, let me come back to you. You know, we discussed earlier how 3 countries in Europe have today formally recognized Palestine as a state. That does put further pressure on Israel in a sense. You know, the Irish foreign minister told journalists after a meeting of the European Union foreign ministers in Brussels that for the first time there was a significant discussion on sanctioning Israel if the country doesn't comply with the ruling of the International Court of Justice. And then, you know, we talked about what President Biden himself said a few days ago in an interview. He said he would halt shipments of weapons to Israel if the latter went ahead with a Rafah offensive. He actually called it a red line. Does President Biden look like he's going to keep his word on that? Because clearly the Rafah offensive is not going to stop.
No. There are pictures that he is sending, supplying weapons from the fires he built in the Mediterranean Sea. And second, that why European government are going away from, this shows they are not happy with the US policies, and they are showing their differences, or path differences between US and European Union on Israel. And we have found that several European countries have cut their aids, and they are telling that they are going to cut off their diplomatic relations as well. So USA will not stop supplying arms to Netanyahu government, nor EU countries are going fully support to the US policies. Here, the announcement of Netanyahu government that it was a tragic incident shows that he is under pressure of both the parties. That US is claiming to be a morally bound country. It's going to protect the civilians, and it has to protect the Arab allies, which are now impatient. Their public is now quite becoming impatient, and they cannot face such kind of killings. And on the other hand, Turkey has also cut off its diplomatic and trade relation with Israel. So this war, Israel war, is going to spread in a different kind of way to engulf all the entire Middle East, and Iran is also licking its wound. So this is the time when world countries, including USA, to take corrective measures, and that is only forming the 2 nation states. This is the solution. Otherwise, and my previous speaker said that the killing of top Hamas leaders will turn it into Al Qaeda. This is not a way. This may not be right, because Hamas is enjoying the support of 2-3 million people, and while Al Qaeda did not have any base, any solid population. Of course, if Netanyahu government succeed in killing the top Hamas leader, it will be a face saving to declare victory and go back. These are the various issues we have to understand at this juncture. But Netanyahu government is also finding opposition within the government itself. And if election held, then Netanyahu government is surely going to lose the power, and that will be a nightmare for Prime Minister Netanyahu. So what I feel that situation has turned into a very, very delicate one, where nobody knows what to do except Netanyahu, who is carrying on his objective in Rafah. And he will not stop his operation while Hamas is also regrouping and launching barrage of rockets. So situation is very volatile.
Yes.
And the region is going to engulf in a different kind of things like passive resistance, passive boycott of Israel.
Okay, it's a very delicate and volatile situation indeed, and you talked about how Hamas, unlike Al-Qaeda, has the support of 2 to 3 million people. Let's not forget there is the very important Iran factor as well. Israel, the US and many others believe that Iran is the country that has been supporting Hamas, Hezbollah and the
Ismail
Houthis.
Haniya was there. Ismail Haniya was in the funeral ceremony of
Ibrahim Raisi. Correct.
That Iran is them.
So that link is undeniable. So there is also the all-important Iran factor in all of this, and that's why we've been asking for months, could this actually become a larger regional conflagration in the Middle East? Ambassador Goel, let me ask you a couple of questions. Number one, do you believe the Biden administration's support to Israel's war in Gaza could emerge as a major issue in the US presidential election, or you think at the end of the day Americans are too consumed by their own domestic issues to actually vote on an issue such as this? And two, tomorrow, hypothetically speaking, let's say there is a more moderate government that replaces Netanyahu's far-right government. Will that government be more amenable to a two-state solution?
They are very important questions. Number one, as far as Biden's support to Israel is concerned, I think Netanyahu is now riding a tiger which he cannot dismount. He has unleashed a kind of a war hysteria from Israel, encouraged by the right conservative group, and he's simply not able to stop it. And he knows it very well that the day the war stops, his political career is over. And therefore, continuing with the war, he thinks is politically in his interest. Neither Biden can stop it, nor Netanyahu will stop it, number one. Number two, change of government in Israel. I doubt very much. I don't recall at any given time in history when the governments have changed in the midst of a war. Even though people in Israel, they do realize that it's basically the hysteria created by Netanyahu, which is partly responsible for what happened. But I don't think they will change the government in the midst of a war. Number three, which you have not mentioned, you mentioned partly Iran. Iran is itself in a flux. Raisi is dead. The person who's replaced him is even more conservative than Raisi was. What is Iran's role going to be? Where is Hamas getting the support from? Iran is not going to let the situation in Middle East go at its own expense and let Saudi Arabia take the lead role. That is going to be very, very unlikely. And therefore, what I would say in very brief is that we need to wait for at least another 5 or 6 months before we can say one way or the other as to where the war is going to go. Neha.
At least another 5 to 6 months. General Meston, would you agree with that assessment that the war is likely to last for at least another 5 to 6 months? Also, interestingly, earlier you were linking it to the US elections. What exactly did you mean? If you could elaborate on that.
Firstly, it will last longer, 2 to 6 months or 2 to 5 months, I stated. There is no doubt. Now, linking to US elections does not mean that, this is going to be the mainstay for the US elections. No, this is one of the issues. And let me tell you, even if President Trump comes back, he is going to be more hardliner. We have known that from Tel Aviv, he had moved the embassy to Jerusalem, so the US embassy. So he is also going to be a hardliner, and the entire US administration, irrespective of which party comes, they will always continue to support Israel. Now, next question is about Iran. See, Iran has been only using proxies. It tried to get involved directly, but let's remember what was the retaliation. Even Jordan was part of it. So I also foresee, I'm quite optimistic. Things will take time. But finally, at the end of the day, let me tell you, we are going to have a big success. The IMEC corridor will go through because, firstly, UAE, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and of course, I would say Tel Aviv.
All right, we will leave it at that. On that note, Dr. Zakir Hussain, General Sanjay Meston, Ambassador Suresh Goel, thank you so much to all three of you for joining me on Global Lens tonight. Let's now get you the latest on the devastating landslides that have recently struck Papua New Guinea. Satellite imagery from Maxar Technology